Hi everyone, welcome to another painting walkthrough. This one is for a painting that I've called Manhattan Sunset. It was really inspired by a photograph of Julie Delpy, the actress, the French actress. There was a portrait photograph taken of her by a photographer called, I believe it's pronounced Stéphane Cotel or Stéphanie Cotel. He's a French photographer, and he did an amazing photograph of her against a train track. So she's kind of standing in the foreground, just to the left. She's got a cigarette in her mouth, and she's sort of looking partially towards the camera, but just slightly off. And there's something really, really nice that I really liked about that picture. So I use it as a reference. So here you can see I am just painting in some of the elements, just using my angled brush and using the Ghost in the Machine color palette. Didn't really have a clear idea of what I wanted, so I was kind of using the photograph as a sort of as a reference, but I wasn't referencing it as you've seen me do in the past with the image on the side. I kind of just had it in my mind and went for it. One of the problems is, as you can see in the background, and you will start to see as it develops, is the perspective is off. So the train tracks sort of go too high. If you look at the actual original photograph, the sort of horizon line of that train track in the background only goes up to her shoulder, and I've kind of just gone way off here at the moment. So things do change a little bit as we get through this painting, and actually everything in the background becomes completely different. So here you can see me just laying out some very basic details of the face, positions of the mouth, the nose, the eyes. Still not certain about exactly what it's going to look like. And I think one of the things I need to get used to at the moment is consistently drawing faces that are recognizable. At the moment, for this character, who is the character of Anya, which is an original character I've come up with, she constantly looks different in every single painting in terms of her face. Where her features are, the size of her eyes, where her nose is, things like that. So I'm still trying to work on that consistency. So in the actual photograph, Julie Delpy is wearing like a big fur coat. So I've replaced that with this Anya's sort of typical leather jacket. Made it a little bit baggier this time. I haven't made it that sort of short crop style. So I've made it a bit more like a larger, oversized jacket, which I really like actually. Had a bit of trouble here because I was initially painting in the skirt, but I think the colours just weren't working. It was a little bit too bright for the foreground, so it wasn't really working. Now one of the things I notice when I do go back through my painting walkthroughs is I actually like the painting where it is now in terms of the style of it, and sort of how it looks in the colour palette. But you know, as time goes on, you keep messing with it and changing things, and you're not quite sure. You sort of have that element of doubt when you're painting, and so you keep changing and fiddling with things. But I suppose it's a bit of the benefit and a curse of hindsight when you're looking back over. So you can see I'm painting now in still with that same angled brush. I'm painting in ideas. I thought of making this a crop top. It didn't actually work in the end, so I made it all black. I just wanted to have some kind of definition, so it didn't all disappear behind that jacket. So I tried this, had her with her hands in her pocket, and just painting in all the creases of the jacket. One thing I actually realised during this painting was I'd been using the brush far too small, particularly when painting things like the jacket, and so it was sort of getting too much into these fiddly details. And when I changed the size of the brush and used a kind of much larger strokes and just painted broader, more confident strokes, the jacket just sort of appeared before me. The creases appeared as I wanted them. What I'd do before is paint very, very small strokes for everything, and it became very fiddly. And it created a different style, really. So if you look at some of my previous paintings, particularly the one in the Beat It pool hall, there's a lot of detail in it, whereas this I'm being much rougher, and actually it was much more enjoyable to paint. There's a bit more freedom to it. So you can see just big, large strokes. I knew where the shadows would go, so I just sort of, just painted them in roughly where they would go. And as you can see, using just a variation in brightness of that sort of whitish, orangey colour hue, you can see that the creases are starting to appear in the jacket where they should. One of the benefits of digital painting is being able to lasso around different elements, cut them out and move them. One of the things you cannot do when you're obviously working on a canvas, you can't just quickly move something. If you've got the proportions wrong, you kind of have to start again and paint over it. But with this, I can kind of just cut it out, move it around, experiment, see with my eye where it works, and then where I'm happy, I'll reposition it and then just paint over some of the edges. Struggled with the hair quite a bit on this one because I was actually trying to use the hairstyle that was in the photograph of Julie Delpy, which was very, very difficult to mimic at the moment for me. It was a sort of a middle parting, and if you've noticed before, I haven't done the hair like this for Anya's character. I've not done a middle parting like this before with the hair down, so it was quite difficult trying to get it right, and you'll notice I keep switching backwards and forwards. For the hair, actually, again, I mean, I actually have only been using, apart from using the primer brush at the very beginning, I've only been using this angled brush here to paint in pretty much everything, and it works really well for the hair as well. One thing I don't do, I haven't set the brush to change angles with the position of the pen, and I haven't been tilting the angle either. I've been doing it all from this one angle, and actually it really works for me. Sometimes it causes complications when I'm trying to paint sort of maybe on the left side of something as opposed to the right side of something, because the stroke is naturally thinner, but I haven't really felt the need to change it. I kind of work within that limitation. Obviously, when you use the brush, you can set it to change angles in Photoshop, and you can even just right click and move the angle to an exact position if you want it to. I just find it a bit fiddly, and it kind of slows my process down, so unless I absolutely need it, I don't do it. So here you can see me just painting completely over the background and readjusting the horizon to the shoulder, because it's just more of a realistic position for that horizon. I'm also repainting the face. I'd actually come back the next day and started working on this, and noticed the face was looking a little bit too cartoony. The eyes were far too big. It looked a little bit manga-like, so I was trying to remove that and get a bit more of a realistic feel to the face. Getting the expression in the eyes was actually quite difficult because I think I was initially trying to reference the photo a little bit too much. And so I kind of went back to the drawing board and just decided to use my own sort of style to get the eyes right. And I actually started to like where the eyes were going. They're still not done completely, but they're getting there. Here you can see me having a lot of trouble with the hair because it just wasn't looking right to me. Trying to get the fall right, and you probably hear me talking about the fall of the hair in other videos where the hair looks like it's naturally falling, and one thing I do like is it clumping up by the collar and naturally falling below it rather than being this sort of pristine and perfect hair, which I'm not really a fan of. I really do like painting kind of messier, more realistic hair, but not being realistic in terms of painting every single strand, but just giving the impression of real hair and the way it falls. As I was actually working through this, there was a couple of times I started to notice that the character looked like Javier Bardem's character in No Country for Old Men. Probably just me that thinks that, but it was the hair that it just wasn't falling right, and it started to look like a bit of a mushroom cut, and so I kept reworking it. Here you can see I did resize the eyes a little bit. You know that I initially made them very large and then I sort of made them too small. So I've just, again, used the lasso tool and resized it. Here I'm playing with the idea of the train track again. I'd removed it, but I kind of got the horizon a little bit better here. And you saw initially I'd painted a motorbike in the background, but I've got rid of that now. So I'm now mimicking the buildings that were in that photograph. I'm trying to paint them using just the angled brush here. And then I'm using the hard flat brush just to paint in some lights on the buildings. Another disclaimer, most of this disappears later because I'm still experimenting. Didn't really like this look. It gave me a lot of trouble trying to get these buildings right. And you'll notice in a second, the main reason I had such trouble is because my perspective was all off. And there's a technique I'm going to do in a minute which fixes everything. I also had a lot of trouble just getting the detail right on the buildings, and to be honest with you, I'd forgotten how to use my own brushes, particularly the hard flat brush. because it just wasn't working. And then I went away and I went and watched a tutorial on Skillshare by an artist called Rainbow. It's rainb.w. And she did a great tutorial on using watercolors with a flat brush to create cityscapes. And that was kind of my original inspiration. So I went away and then I redrew here, as you can see, the perspective lines, and then got the flat brush out and just started painting in buildings where I'd marked them out. And it suddenly just started to come alive, and I started to see what this flat brush, the really the beauty of this flat brush, and why you'd use it even in a painting setting in terms of traditional art. The flat brush is just so versatile, and it's very, very good for architecture because of those straight lines, and you can create loads of detail that isn't actually there just by giving the impression of it. So I'm using it. I've actually changed the angle of it there to paint in the road, painted a little car there where there was a motorbike, and now I'm just using the brush with the color dodge setting just to get in some of these lights, creating the illusion of windows. Go a little bit overboard in the foreground here, or sort of the middle ground, should I say. Lights are way too bright, but I do correct that later. And now I'm using my oil brush actually. So as you know, normally I use the primer brush to do the base coat, and then I leave the sky with that primer brush look, so it kind of has that painterly feel. But actually I went in and used my oil brush to go over the top of it to get a bit of a better blend really, and it still had a really nice painterly look, but it just gave a very different feel, and I really liked it. You can see I'm messing around with the hair again. Again, I think the top of it's way too flat and it starts to mushroom out a little bit. It just wasn't working. Really glad that I included this the telephone poles in this picture, because it really helped with the perspective and the believability. And just liked adding those birds in there as well, just to, again, give a bit more interest to the painting and a bit more depth. Had a bit of trouble with this, the closest building here, so I made it like a smaller building and changed the perspective of that, so you could see the side of that larger building there. Again, it was far too bright, and what I noticed, because I kept painting over it to get rid of the lights, and then I included more lights, and then I painted over it again. Every time I was painting over it, it was leaving some paint underneath, and it just created so much depth, and it made the building actually look very intricate. And as you can see towards the back, the detail drops off, and that really helps again with perspective. Playing around with some blending modes on the color lookup there, a bit of vibrancy. One thing I like to do is use a color lookup, because if the balance of my palette is a little bit off, and things don't quite look like they belong, i.e. that Anya's character in the foreground, in this case, doesn't quite look like she matches the background, the color lookup can just blend all those colors together and sort of give a bit more of a uniform feel to the palette, which it's starting to do now. What I like about this is it does feel like a photograph. It doesn't feel like a painting where something is actually in the middle of happening, or even a photograph of something sort of, caught in catching the action as it happens. It's more like this person has actually posed for a photograph or for a painting, with that car approaching in the background. See here, I'm experimenting with the hues. I always do this, and sometimes I'll experiment just to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. So if I've looked at my color palette and I like it, then I kind of I'll go away, and then I'll come back and may think, oh, I'm not too sure now. I'll experiment with some hues, and then it'll get to where I want it. Here you can see me. I've brought in some grunge sort of canvas texture into the painting, as you just saw then. And what I tend to do with that is I use the blend if sliders just to get rid of the blacks and the whites, and I get this really nice texture come through, and then I copy and paste that all the way around the painting, and as you can see, it's just bleeding through here, and I just do a nice little blend. It actually feels like it's a canvas that's been painted on. Very, very difficult to do with just your brushes in Photoshop, because the brushes don't work like real paint brushes, unfortunately. So they don't leave sort of bits of mess or like build up or rough patches. They're a little bit too crisp. And so when you use these textures over the top, it just really brings it to life and makes it feel a lot more like a real painting, really. Again, I'm experimenting with different colours here. Still trying to get the shadows right. Is the separation with Anya's character in the background I was trying to get right, so the perspective looked okay. And then finally, I just realised that hair wasn't working, so I went back in over the top, redid it, or almost painted it from scratch, really, using the base colours underneath. You can see I got a bit of a better fall to it now. You can see it's just little bits of the hair coming over the top of the jacket. And there you go. Really proud of this painting. It's much more sort of a mix of my old abstract style and my newer sort of detail approach to characters, but I really like the mix of it. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you on the next one.